Hello and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan.
You're watching Consider This, the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. The COVID-19 immunization plan will begin on Wednesday. That's 2 days earlier than initially scheduled, with Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin and Health Director General Dr. Nur Hisham Abdullah to receive their first jabs in 2 days. Now, will it all go according to plan? Where are the potential pitfalls? Joining us on the show tonight, we have Datuk Seri Dr. Dzulkefly Ahmad. He's the former health minister and head of the Selangor Task Force for COVID-19, also chairperson for the Pakatan Harapan Immunization Task Force. Good evening, Dr. Zul. It's good to have you here.
Good evening, Melissa. Thanks for having me again.
Yes. Okay. So last week, when the National Vaccine Handbook was announced, was released, one of the things that was identified, Dr. Zul, was the fact that what seemed to be missing within this handbook was the clearly defined interaction between MOH, between the Ministry of Health, and MOSTI, the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation. And I'm wondering whether you are concerned about, or you can foresee overlap or potential problems in terms of communication in having two coordinating ministries without clearly defined roles.
Well, Melissa, I must say in no uncertain term that well, the idea of whole of government would be, the way forward. But however, the whole of government's approach, as advocated by WHO, does not at all, imply that such a confusion that has cropped up now in Malaysia is the way to go, right? I must say, with all due respect, that an integral part of public health is the need for an effective risk communication strategy. Yeah, and thank God, alhamdulillah, we have witnessed the successful delivery of the first, consignment of about 300 over 1,000 doses, from Belgium that's arrived yesterday. However, beyond that, what is to me a bit more anxious and I'm concerned about is this coordinating thing. Apparently MOSTI is coordinating the vaccine purchase and procurement, while the MOH is focused on vaccine implementation, jabbing it to the arms, of our citizenry. And it seems, with all due respect, admittedly, there's a bit of too many chefs or cooks in the kitchen, it look like. But but let me say this, right? The creation of a vaccine minister actually, admittedly and arguably, perhaps, it has complicated the issue, because functionally and organizationally, immunization has always been the domain of MOH, not any other ministries, though. They have been doing this, from ages. They have been doing it from the NIPs from the 1950s, right? But somehow the PM may not be quite properly advised on this. I'm not saying he's fully advised, but there seems to be something that must be desired in this. I would have.
Dr. Zul, let me just ask you this. Just to follow on to this, the question of why there's a need for, as it were, two ministries. And in fact, in our interview with Khairi Jamaluddin, the MOSTI minister, he said that they would divide the work. They would both jointly do the communications, but they would each have their part. Perhaps the solution is really much less about operations than to set priorities and principles. So there seems to be some confusion about that dimension. How do you see that?
That's a good question, because that while it's all well intended, but you could already see those, a kind of a conflict in communication by way of details, and that's where I'm coming from, So ideally, I would have thought that it would have been, a lot better off. It would have, I would have designated this task to the Public Health Division of MOH, which would be the central coordinating agencies, though, that would oversee the entire work from process of procurement right to its injection into the, to the delta or the upper arms of our vaccinees, right? But be that as it may, it has been, arranged that way because we must, we must recognize that MOH has the technical know-how, the skills, the experience, and wisdom, whatever, since handling the national immunization program from the 1950s, though. Yeah. So perhaps mostly the new kid on the block, with all due respect, and I could see that Minister KJ is doing, his level best. But the reason why you are seeing this a bit of conflict in communication, as I've stated, it's so very important to have effective communication and risk communication strategy, and hence the reason why you are saying this, Sharaad.
Can I ask you,
yeah,
Dr. Zul, what are the drawbacks? So having, you say, there's risk in miscommunication, but what does that entail? What does miscommunication reflect to the public already struggling with vaccine confidence and lack of transparency and detail when it comes to the national vaccine rollout?
You have said it all, but let me just give you an example, to just cite an example. When Minister KJ make a mention, he was quoted, he was said to have a mention of 75,000 doses per day, while our Minister of Health were allegedly said to have quoted 126,000 doses per day, almost like twice the amount said by or quoted by KJ. So, who do you really want to believe, and what really would be the the end of the day? What will really matter? So, and this is in all fairness, utterly confusing both to the vaccinators, on the ground, and to the general public. You can't say it otherwise. So, because since the stewardship of the national COVID-19 program is shared between two ministries with two heads, due respect, we hope that they can speak to one another and get their action in tandem more, and then they sort out a communication uniformly, as to avoid all this confusing messages to the public.
Okay. Dr. Zul, can I just ask you, I mean, I understand that having two heads is going to be difficult in any organization or in any project, but recently you urged for Director General Hisham, DG Hisham, to not allow for political interference or for politicians to dictate pandemic management. And this was because I believe there was a recent announcement by Adam Baba about exempting the cabinet from the 10-day quarantine rule from overseas assignments. And you issued a reminder not to let there be any political interference. Is that the case then? Could we see just having a civil servant, the Director General of Health is a civil servant, there might be issues of political interference, and that's why there is a minister with political influence to manage the pandemic management.
Right, Melissa, but may I say this, that putting myself in their shoes right now, 1 year ago I was there, almost 24th of February. I must say that when I must qualify what I have said. When I said that to DG, it was really meant where action and policies must be strongly premised on evidence and on science. I told him not to be pushed around or bullied by the political leaders. So that's what I meant to mean. Very, very qualified though. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I must say that the minister, whether MOSTI or MOH, must take all responsibility for their action, and then the buck stops at them, so to say. So yes, there must be a kind of check and balance, and I meant what I said at that point, Melissa, because that was a 3 days quarantine, which is against science. That was what I meant particularly. I qualify myself.
Doctor, one of the other issues, of course, is the issue of who constitutes a frontliner. And there's some, again, you know, we've already got some of the numbers out of those who have applied among the frontliners and the definition of what frontliners. There are groups that are saying, why aren't hospital janitorial staff, why aren't security guards, you know, in that group? Do you think we'll just continue to have these conflicts about who is in a frontliner? Because at the end of the day, it's a question of limited vaccines.
Yeah.
And then therefore, who should get it first?
Very true, Sharaad. There's always this, when the resources are scarce, that you have to strategize. You got to have prioritization kind of plan. But you know, with all due respect, frontliners, beside the HCW or the healthcare workers, you know, the paramedics and others, would of course be those who are literally and physically in the front line. You know, whether they are somehow, you know, whether they are the paramedics, of course the paramedics are included, you know, whether they are, for that matter, the ATM, the you know, the PDRM, the, you know, and as well the others, you know. And in fact, I would say that sometimes, you know, cleaners themselves, if you understand super spreaders individuals and event, a cleaner as naive as innocuous as he or she could be in that setup, could very well be a super spreader, because she moves around. So Sarah, you got to understand the signs of it, you know, the sign of super spreading and what is known as the dispersion value more than just the R naught value, as I've talked you know, a lot earlier. So super spreading events and individuals must be identified, and that's how I think a function of what you call as frontliners,
Right.
is to understand that.
Dr. Zul, are politicians considered super spreaders? Should they be given priority? I mean, we know the Prime Minister is going to be the first to receive the jab. In New Zealand, you know, Jacinda Ardern is saying that she does not need to be the first to receive the jab. Where do you stand on this?
I think there is a context to this. Politicians can be super spreaders if they are involved in such super spreading event like a by-election or even a general election, Malaysia. And you have seen that. I don't have to. It's so illustrative, overwhelmingly, you know, clear in the case of Sabah. State election, So I don't think I need to go into that. But more importantly, if our Prime Minister would want to take it on himself to be the first, it's quite different from the New Zealand Jacinda's position, because, you know, here perhaps we are also faced with another context, which is of course the vaccine hesitant, if not outrightly anti-vaxxers. So perhaps him taking it first would somehow, you know, be the shot in the arm, you know, in a figurative language, for others to believe that, well, if the Prime Minister is willing to do it, you know, this why not us and why not me, right? So this is, I think there is a context to this. So you know, but of course, politicians, again, I must say, if politicians are involved in those events that you know, expose themselves, or then they could be considered. They could be considered over this. But as you know very well, Parliament is suspended, and how do we get to this? Perhaps it's a chicken and egg. If we get to be immunized, we can go. You know, we can have open up. You know, and have good debates in the Parliament, because that would be the most pertinent thing, most demanding thing right now.
That's a great argument to get our politicians vaccinated. Dr. So we're going to take a quick break, but let's come back and continue this conversation. You brought up issues of vaccine hesitancy and building that confidence, and we're going to come back and discuss all of that. So make sure you stay tuned to consider this. We'll be right back. Hi, thanks for staying with us on Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris. With me is Sharaad Kuttan. Let's continue our conversation with former Health Minister, Dr. Dzulkefly Ahmad. He's also the head of the Selangor Task Force for COVID-19 and Pakatan Harapan Task Force for Immunisation. The first shipments containing some 312,000 doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine will be delivered to states Selangor, KL, Putrajaya, Johor, and Penang. Sharaad, you had a question about the state's role when it comes to vaccine procurement.
Yeah, Dr. Zul, if you could help us understand, there was a report some weeks ago, perhaps some months ago now, that Selangor was also thinking of purchasing vaccines. And I think Sarawak also made, the government of Sarawak
Yeah.
also made
Yeah.
such claims. Could you explain this? Is Selangor purchasing vaccines directly? Are they doing it through the federal government? And why are they doing it if the federal government has already got this national plan?
Right. Quite a pertinent question to ask me, although Melissa started off by saying over the arrival of the 112,000 overdoses, that would really be within the domain and preview of the GKNS, particularly in Selangor. I wouldn't want to touch that, but of course it is the gargantuan task, of the logistical, back end kind of, movement of all these vaccines. But I'll leave that for another occasion perhaps, but I will go straight into what Sharaad were asking earlier. Yes, Sharaad, we with all due consideration and respect for the federal government immunization program, um, over and above immunizing our frontliners in the state of Selangor, and as well our our old age, particularly with those with the NCDs, underlying diseases, and whatever. So we had a consideration. Bearing in mind Selangor is contributing 25% of the GDP of the nation, we were anxious of protecting our industries. So we in STFC, mooted the idea of to the chief minister of Selangor themselves on their own, making initiatives to get and to procure, to purchase, and to ensure that our industries are protected. And by so doing, it presupposes that we will be inoculating, immunizing our workforces, which of course will be nationals and non-nationals, and foreign workers particularly. So yes, we had that consideration, and we were very clear what the premise and the objectives. It's just not about other objective of herd immunity, bring down mortality, whatever. But with us on this program, we want to ensure that we protect our industries. As you very well know, clusters, ignition of clusters are well in the workplaces, so those kind of settings, and that's where our consideration of procuring vaccines ourselves, so that we would have a way to encourage and incentivize industries and stakeholders and employers to be on it fast, so that going by priority, we could foreign workers would be perhaps among the lowest in priority, Sharaad, if ever they come to that stage. But with this program, they will be among the earlier ones. After and above, immediately after the frontliners, we'll get to inoculate our workforce.
Okay, can I follow up on that? Just to
Yeah.
clarify, what you mean to say is that Selangor State will be procuring a separate batch of vaccines, this to make sure that its industries are protected. By that you mean workers in industries separate from those on a priority list from the federal government. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And who would be on this list?
Yeah, you know very well that the phase 3 would only be talking about, if ever we come to that stage, that will be 10 to 12 months down the road. So it is immediately our workforce in our industries, our factories, and all those. So yes, we would have to get a good database on all this, and working through it. We will exactly know what are our priorities in terms of our workforces for them to be immunized as well quite early, so that this is why we were talking to manufacturers, and suppliers quite well ahead, quite early on, and we are just about the tail end of securing vaccines for the state of Selangor.
Oh, that's very interesting. Is it possible, Dr. Zul, to tell us a bit more, give us some details, because the reports have suggested that the big pharmaceutical companies are dealing with national governments. And how is it that the state of Selangor is able to do that? Is it a different vaccine from the ones that we have been identified of late? And if so, is approval still an issue for this particular vaccine program?
Right. You know very well that only the MPRA has only, endorsed Pfizer, and the rest are all more or less will be in the same boat, in the same league. So we are very hopeful that the NPRA will expedite this, and we are talking to, possible the possible candidate for possible vaccine candidates are, you very well would not be more than the 5 or 6 of those potential ones. So we have been talking to almost all of them, and that we are, as I said, almost at the end to secure this. And what is important is that we get it at a good price. All those, for as long as NPRA would endorse it, so it will be, by way of safety, efficacy, will all be well in place. So, this is what we are doing right now, and I may not be able to divulge or disclose any of those details right now. But hopefully
Okay.
we'll get the best price and the best,
We're
best.
gonna follow up with you once those details are being made public.
Okay.
So we're
No
gonna come
worries.
back and have
No
this
worries.
conversation.
No, very
Uh,
willing to share though.
Dr. Zul, you're also part of the Pakatan Harapan Task Force for Immunization. I'm curious to know what that task force, what that role is. Is that task force included into federal level conversations? What exactly is the Pakatan Harapan Task Force doing regarding
Um,
the national rollout?
Right. Okay. I'll be honest with you. Much as we would like to be roped in a form of a caucus, or discussion with the authorities, at least with our political counterparts. But for now, we have not received any kind of reciprocal kind of response. But we keep, issuing our communique, our press releases as to, as to assume the role of check and balance. I think we have released 3 so far, and we're just about to release one or today or tomorrow.
Mhm.
But that is more on the vaccination per se, and the vaccination proper, in the sense of all the logistical problem, the nitty-gritty of getting it, be administered to our rakyat. So
Right.
yes, we keep, we we provide alternative views, and not so much of not so much of critique, but more of, as you very well know, this is about the thing that I've said today, are all the opinions of STFC, and as well our PH vaccines task force. So there will be more that we will be releasing, and we will
Right.
keep continuing to
Okay.
monitor and to provide some second opinion, or not second opinion, but what I call as a check and balance.
Would you be providing your arms as well? I mean, I want to come back to Dr. Zul to the question of confidence in the vaccine or the vaccines, since there are multiple vaccines. And the chattering classes are reading up on Google and becoming semi-literate as we all are in epidemiology and vaccine technology. I do want to ask you, who best at this point in time in a country so divided politically? Does it matter that the prime minister, in fact, gets vaccinated? When he might not enjoy the universal acceptance himself as a political leader. So, what about religious leaders, celebrities? I mean, Siti Nurhaliza comes to mind. Somebody who the general public would trust because they don't have a vested political interest in what's going on.
Right. Well said, Sharaad. If at all we want to address this issue of vaccine hesitance and hesitancies, more than just the anti-vaxxers who will not budge in their position, I would say that, yeah, you need to rope in and to showcase those, opinion leaders, not just opinion leaders, they're celebrities as well, and the iconic, personalities in the society, so that, including perhaps as well, for those the particular constituencies of the religious, from the religious perspective, if they get to see, one or two muftis coming forward, getting vaccinated, perhaps it will inject, the kind of confidence and allay their kind of anxiety or concerns. Yeah. So yeah, depending on the various constituencies, you got to bring forth the kind of opinion leaders and leaders of communities, for you to address those issues of vaccine hesitancy, Sharaad.
Dr. Zul, thank you so much for being on the show tonight. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and thank you for sharing some of the insights that you have on
I wanted to say a lot more,
but
we'll have you back, Dr. Zul.
All right,
time flies.
Thanks, Melisa. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. That's all we have for you on this episode of Consider This. Don't forget to get all your latest news and updates on the COVID-19 vaccines on astroawani.com and the Astro Awani app. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan, signing off the evening.
Thank you so much for watching, and good night.